Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Music for a Book podcast, Season 3. We are your hosts. I'm Britt.
And I'm Hannah.
And every 2 weeks, we read and review a book, assign a song to that book, draw the parallels between the two, and have some fun along the way. So welcome back to Season 3, Episode 8 of the Music for a Book podcast.
Yes, and this week we've read one of Goodreads' top books of last year, 2024. We read The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley.
Yes. So, how this episode is going to work is we are going to go over trigger warnings and a brief synopsis for the book, and then we're going to reveal our song choices, which is our favorite part of the podcast. After our song choices, we move into what we like to call spoiler territory, meaning after that point, we will be covering anything and everything that happens cover to cover in this book. And this one, we will definitely be talking ending to the beginning, how it connects together. So if you don't want spoilers, that would be your time to pause the podcast, back out, and come back once you've read it. If you've read the book, or if you're just here for the vibes, tune in, stick around. Dear reader, just some book and theme warnings for the Ministry of Time. We got these from Storygraph. There is death, gun violence, sexual content, racism, cannibalism, murder, war, genocide, slavery. This book does deal with time travel, so there are a lot of kind of interwoven pieces of history in the story. So just be aware when you're diving in.
Yes. So synopsis, got this from Goodreads, but I believe it's the one that's on the book as well. There are several ways to tell a story. A civil servant starts working as a bridge, a liaison, helpmeet, and housemate in an experimental project that brings expatriates from the past into the 21st century. This is a science fiction story. In a London safe house in the 2020s, a disoriented Victorian polar explorer chain smokes while listening to Spotify and learning about political correctness. This is a comedy. During a long, sultry summer, as the shadows around them grow long and dangerous, two people fall in love against all odds. This is a romance. The Ministry of Time is a novel about Commander Graham Gore and a woman known only as the Bridge. As their relationship turns from strictly professional into something more, and uneasy truths begin to emerge, they are forced to face the reality of the project that brought them together. Can love triumph over the structures and histories that shape them?
Very interesting. So let's talk about our song choices for the Ministry of Time. And so I want to tell you the song that I was going to pick first because it was the first one that popped in my head, and I think it was more obvious, and then I'll tell you the one that I went with. So the first song, I think halfway through, I was like, I'm definitely going to pick Timeless by Taylor Swift.
Same.
Like, yeah, without a doubt, that's going to be my song choice. And then I was like, it's so on the nose. Like, it's a little too on the nose. And I ended up not loving, like, the romance aspect, so I went off. I actually did not pick a Taylor Swift song this time around. I am very excited to finally feature a song by this artist. And I picked The View Between Villages by Noah Kahan.
Hi, baby. Love that. I picked The Scientist by Coldplay.
Ooh, I looked at Coldplay. I did, which we'd love to see. So can't wait to talk about those song choices later. I had a feeling that both of us thought about Timeless. Like, it fits so well.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to use a song, I think I just want to use it on something that's a little less, like, direct hit.
Yeah. All right. Spoiler territory. We're time traveling. Time
traveling, everyone.
So pause now if you want to travel through your own timelines. Otherwise, stick around if you read the book. We are excited to go through a little summary with our review intertwined.
Yes. All right. Ministry of Time. Let's chat about it.
First thing, is there a point in time that you'd want to travel to?
Okay. Like, time travel is a little freaky to me. And not in like a terrifies me kind of way, more in like a, I don't know if I would be an explorer of time travel. Because like the places that I would want to go would just be to see like how things unfolded at like the Salem witch trials. But if I went to the Salem witch trials, I would be burned at the stake. Like,
yeah,
I would be dead on impact. Actually, real quick aside, real funny story. This summer, I hosted a presentation night, and one of our friends, Sam, did a presentation on who we were in a past life and how we died. And she said, was a witch in the Salem witch trials, and I was burned at the stake. And I do believe that to be true.
I can see that. I agree.
So I'm most interested in like that like time period just for like curiosity's sake, but I would die, so no.
Yeah, that's what
about
like
you?
Yeah, I don't know, because in theory, I love the idea. And I'd be
Hmm.
like, all right, I'd like to go more so, I think, in the like the Harry Potter, like pensive style, like go back in like
Yeah.
memories where like
Yes. 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 Yes.
you're
Yes.
visiting that time, but you're not actually like an active participant,
Mm,
is probably how I would like to time travel with that.
totally.
So, yeah, because my next question was going to be like, if you had the opportunity, would you? And I don't know
I
if I
don't
would.
I don't think so. I think there's just like so many things can go wrong. One of my favorite shows of all time, Fringe. If anyone, that's a huge deep cut there. If anyone ever watched Fringe, rewatched it during the shutdown of 2020, and man, time travel can just really fuck some shit up, in my opinion. So I think it scares me too much to try and do it.
Then also with the story, kind of with the synopsis too. There's basically like three, I feel like, types of stories being told throughout the book, like the
Hmm.
sci-fi side of things, the comedy side of things, and like the romance.
Yeah.
Which like avenue did you like best, and did you like how they were kind of all woven together?
Okay, so I think that like the dry British humor was probably my favorite part of it. I think that because it's like unintentionally funny and in ways that like these, characters from the 1800s are now listening to Spotify and like it said in the synopsis, chain smoking, riding bicycles, going to pubs, like
Mm-hmm.
watching movies for the first time. And I think like that the humor to it was my favorite part. I did not love how everything was woven together. I don't think any of the three concepts were fleshed out well enough to stand up in like an interwoven story.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I didn't really realize it was a romance, and so that
Hmm.
like threw me off through the book.
Yeah, and it's like it
So
was heavy on the
yeah.
romance. And I was like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but I didn't buy the romance. Like I
Mm-mm.
didn't feel anything. And that could also be because we are romance readers. And I think
Yeah.
that like, it is a different type of scenario, a different type of romance, but like I wasn't expecting it to be like a contemporary romance, but like I just didn't believe their connection.
Yeah.
And the sci-fi elements I was most excited for. I was most excited for the time travel, most excited to see how things played out with the ministry. Come to find out that I didn't think that they were fully realized. And the author kind of expected us to just be like, I'm not going to explain it to you because I can't explain it, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Like it wasn't the things that I had questions to, she was like, you just have to accept this as reality, which in my opinion, in a sci-fi, you can't do.
Yeah, I mean, because I just read like a Blake Crouch book
Yeah.
that deals with like multiverse and everything, and
Hmm.
traveling between different like timelines basically, and that I thought was amazing. So I think I did a disservice to like these back to back with that too. But all
Yeah.
right, so let's get into the book.
Yes.
It was interesting, like how these chapters were done, because we alternate between the narrator, which we don't know her name, in the
Mhm.
21st century, and then we get like flashbacks from Graham Gore in the 19th century. It's like very little bit here and there with that.
And I will say, I know this didn't bother you because I asked you about it, but these are long as fuck chapters. They're
They are.
so long. It's 10 chapters in total with these little interludes from the second POV that we get that third person narrator in the 19th century. And like, I also think I listening to this on audio did the book a disservice. I don't think that the audiobook is worth it. And I would 100% pick this book up and like physically read it if you have not. If you're still listening and you're like, maybe I'll read this, don't do the audiobook. Don't do it.
No, physically read it. For
Physically
sure.
read it. But yeah, these chapters take for fucking ever. They're so long. Like,
I
I
know.
just, I understand. So it's similar because I haven't read a ton of sci fi to like just throw that out there. I've only read like a very small, limited amount. I will say, Blake Crouch and Recursion also only had, I think it was 5 or 6 chapters in it. But I felt like the way it was split up with the then and now and these, again,
Hmm.
we read about time travel and things were explained in a way that I fully connected to and understood, even the sciencey bits of it. So I think like it just felt very like
Drawn out.
drawn out. I think too because I'm just going like straight into my feelings now because we'll talk about the plot too, but like because everything that happens in the book for the most part is so mundane and is so day to day and is so very much like it's a fish out of water someone from the 18th century coming into the 21st century, discovering these things, and it's so like minute details about their day to day presented in a very like matter of fact, dry manner that I was like this halfway through. Like, I don't know. It's weird though, because I still kind of enjoyed. I'm confused. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll just yap about it here.
We'll keep going.
Kind of with the synopsis, there's a secretive job in the ministry where our narrator, she's working as a bridge to these expats, which are time travelers from like different historical eras. So one of my favorite quotes though from this book is, all the people were history to me but felt alive to him. Because I think it just also plays into like the perspective piece, right? Like, you know, everybody's reality is their reality. And 100%. So we're like, it means one thing to one person, but it's like different for another. So I thought that was cool. So our narrator does get assigned to Graham Gore, who is a 19th century naval officer. And they get moved into like a shared house where Graham is like, I don't know if I should be living with an unmarried woman. Like, this is weird.
Like, this doesn't happen in my time.
Yeah, he's like, what are we going to be called? And same thing, like kind of just that perspective, like, oh yeah, just a different, such a different time that they live in.
Totally. And then in these little, third person POVs we get, in the 19th century, Gore discussed the lack of rations for the men on an expedition. And so we do spend a lot of time talking about his history, the expedition he was on, the men that he lost, and the people, the expats that were taken in a moment in time that happened like just before they died. So like they were trying to not alter the fabric of time too much. So he's reconciling with the fact that everyone that he knew is like dead. Gone. Yeah. But we then meet some more of the ministry workers. We meet Quentin, who is our narrator's handler. And again, she is nameless. I didn't love that. I understand some of the anonymity behind it, and it ties into the end, which we'll talk about, in a little bit here. But even in the way that like people addressed her, like even in a first person narrative, you're going to hear your name said back to you. So I thought it was an interesting choice. But we meet Quentin, her handler, Adela, who's the vice secretary of the Ministry of Expatriation, and she notes her like extensive cosmetic surgeries, and they don't look like they were done electively, like they looked like reconstructive surgeries. And then we have Semelia, who is the only Black member of the team, and she urged honesty about the narrator's biracial identity as a woman who had a Cambodian mother and a white father, and the intersection of race and being a mixed race and being able to be like white passing and what that means for racism and things like that was a pretty heavy theme throughout. And that was just something to note. And then the expats go under MRI scans. So we have Arthur, an expat from World War I, Maggie, an expat from the 1600s, and the brigadier, whose outdated language, confused the narrator. They just, the way that they spoke was so outside of the realm of anything that they had studied. So it was definitely odd. Then also, too, Graham, who is with our narrator, sketched an unfamiliar device, and it was projecting something, and the narrator could not identify what that thing was,
which is interesting. Like what did he draw?
Yeah, I still even knowing what we know now, from here to the end, I just don't feel like this was a fully realized concept.
No. And so in the 19th century too, in the little flashback, we do find out that Gore, his hand is beginning to kind of open up like an old wound, because he has scurvy. So one thing that the ministry does is they decide to withhold information on major historical events from the expats. So it happens later in the book, but I thought it was just interesting. The narrator mentions Auschwitz and the Holocaust, and then Gore is like, what did you say? And using the modern technology, the machine, basically Google, to search it, and he's just horrified.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think, some of these things seem so unrealistic, right?
Yeah.
Especially from the 19th century to the 21st, everything that's happened, I couldn't imagine downloading all that information,
no,
from his perspective. It just
no. And so they're not only introduced to a whole new reality, but all of this technology and stuff like that. And then you're seeing the way that like technology is being weaponized and the things that you can do. They're used to like front lines, like hand-to-hand combat, you take ships to war sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that there's like drones and bombs and missiles, and we can do all of this stuff with technology with the push of a button, they were very careful about the way that they like constructed this information, which does come into play at the end. And I do kind of want to talk about that now because the different timelines are being carved from this knowledge, and like decisions that the expats are going to make relies on the information that they get.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting that the only two options for like carved timelines were 9/11 and the Holocaust. I understand that those are very like indelible marks on society, horrible, tragic events, but it didn't make sense to me why like other catastrophic events, like I don't know, Pearl Harbor, Hiroshima, like
Mm-hmm.
Chernobyl, like why those things wouldn't have also made a mark on them and like diverted extra timelines.
Yeah.
And maybe I missed something. I don't know. I was like, why those? And again, I understand the why behind the significance of those two events, but there were also other events in history that I think, you know, if you line them up, would also have caused like a different type of
Mm-hmm.
reaction from the expat.
No, definitely. So this sketch of this unknown projecting
Mm-hmm.
thing, the narrator shows it to Quentin, her handler, and he's like, what the fuck is that? Like, this is alarming. You need to take a step back, which poor Quentin.
I
That's
know,
all I just have to say.
dude.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Mm.
But I like that the expats like were like forced to bond over like just weekly meals.
Yeah.
And we just meet some of the other expats. We meet Margaret Kemble from 1965 and an Army Lieutenant Thomas Cardingham from 1645.
You said
Um,
1965 for Margaret.
oh, oops. Margaret is a lot older than 1965. She's from 1665.
She is.
And
She,
Army
yep.
Lieutenant Thomas Cardingham from 1645. And the Brigadier also joins them,
Mhm.
which I just a random character. I don't know. I don't understand that character, but that's fine.
No, I like now I'm just gonna I don't want to be like negative the whole time because like I said, I didn't hate it, but like every one of these characters was flat to me. Like
Yeah.
I felt like none of them had dimension. The only person that I thought had a little bit of dimension was Arthur. And like even then,
And even then I don't even really we talk about him much.
yeah, like I don't know, like everything just felt very like here it is. And now because we know at the end, again, we said we're going to spoil stuff, but like at the end, what I gathered was this was a retelling to her past self in another timeline that she could make better decisions and like make things, you know, pan out in the way that she would like them
Yeah.
to. So it kind of makes sense that she would say things in a certain way, kind of matter of fact. But I just don't think it made up for the fact that like these characters are very just flat.
Agreed. And so Quentin follows up and like asks the narrator about the sketch of the device. And the
Mhm.
narrator's like, he's just paranoid. Why is he asking about it? Yeah. I don't know. I think I would be paranoid too if this random expat was drawing these things that I had no idea what it was for. Like the narrator just feels so like nonchalant with things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, aren't you
Yeah.
concerned?
And like the narrator was more or less like a glorified government babysitter. And
Mm-hmm.
like I know that there's like a romance that kind of blooms between her and Graham as we move through, but like I feel like she like underreacted and then overreacted to the worst, like she needed to swap those. I don't know if I was with a man that we plucked from whatever year Graham was alive, the 16, 17, 1800s, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely keep like a slightly closer eye on him. Just like a like
Right?
just like a little just like a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
especially
If there
like
was
even like when we find out things like that happened in the 19th century, like Gore accidentally shot somebody while hunting.
yeah,
Like,
like I
come
don't
on,
know.
narrator.
And I also felt like you know, it was all experimental, so we had no idea what it was going to do, one, to their
Yeah.
psyche, two, to their bodies. And we find out too, I don't know if we talk about it in here very much, but like their bodies like stopped showing up on like scans and MRIs and stuff like that. I feel like it was a little too casual for the activities that were taking place.
Yeah. Yes. Well, moving on. The narrator finds out she can no longer contact Quentin, her handler.
Mm.
Dun, dun, dun. But Quentin sent a postcard that was very cryptic. And they had a secret meeting where he said he believes that Graham's sketch depicted a dangerous, futuristic weapon. And then the narrator is like, I need proof. I'm going to maybe report you to the ministry. This is when I was like, girl.
Yeah, I also just didn't. I think if I would have liked our no-name narrator, it would have been a different story.
Yeah.
I didn't care about her. Like, I didn't have, like, an attachment.
I didn't understand her motives.
No.
Like,
no, I didn't get it at all.
This loyalty to the ministry. But even so, like, we'll talk about it here in a little bit, but, like, even when, like, her and Graham start, you know, falling in love, like, her loyalty is still to the ministry.
And on top of that, like, this was not a job she wanted. This was a job she was kind of pigeonholed into at the very beginning, because this was a domino effect. We're going to mastermind it real quick, and the dominoes cascade in a line to make sure that, you know, Adela got her in this position so that they could change time and fix this, you know, these timelines, change the future, blah, 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 all that stuff. But, like, I didn't know why the loyalty rang so deep and so true for this.
Yeah. And then all the poor expats, including our narrator, get a little cold. And they, like, another domino effect. They just all get sick. And it's just, like, modern illnesses. It's just funny to think about. Like, you know, just getting sick. Even, like, if I think about, like, past illnesses. Like, it'd be just such a wild ride to...
Yeah, and, like, Margaret escaped the bubonic plague that, like, took out her entire house. Like, she tried to escape through the window, and, like, people put her back in because it was a plague house, and, like, it took out, I believe it was 3 days. It took for everyone in the house to just be out for the count, but she, like, caught birds and, like, somehow survived, and, like, right before she was, you know, taken from the plague, she was brought into this timeline, and then a common little cold was just the worst for them.
I know. Almost takes them all out. And then Adela does reveal that Quentin, I almost said defecated, but that's not the right
word. I mean, he did kind of shit on the ministry.
Right. I guess that's true. That Quentin is no longer, we're just going to go with that, is no longer at the ministry, which would mean that our narrator needs a new handler. And that's where Adela steps in.
Yeah.
And she tells the narrator that the Brigadier is a spy.
And then in the 19th century, we get another flashback of the crew of an expedition explained to a group of Inuit people that Gore had accidentally killed one of them. The wife of a dead man asked to see Gore. He apologized. It was a very, like, odd situation. He was like, I don't know if I should, like, take her hand and replace her husband, and, like, just very, you know, I'm sure things that they thought about, like, back in the day when, like, things were different, but, you know. And then Graham had a field officer graduation ceremony, was held. Now, our narrator has failed the field test twice already, which is why she couldn't advance in any other position in the ministry, but Quentin discreetly slipped documents into the narrator's bag. But before she could ask Quentin anything about it, he was shot by a sniper or something. And this traumatized our narrator.
Yeah, like,
naturally. So she was traumatized, and this really, you know, caused her to spiral. And but you know who was by her side? The man who wasn't allowed to leave her side, Mr. Graham Gore.
Forced proximity.
Hashtag forced proximity. Hashtag strangers to lovers.
Right. This spiral that she had also led her to look into Quentin's death, because why wouldn't you? I mean, he's giving you these secretive things, and and then she found that someone disabled the CCTVs with her fingerprints. Interesting.
Very interesting, because she wasn't the one to do it.
Yeah. So we take that storyline, then we go into the the strangers to lovers storyline here.
Yep.
And the narrator does invite Graham out to a pub with her friends.
Yeah, where she is then almost murdered.
With an unfamiliar weapon.
Yes, by the brigadier. He
Yes.
tries to kill them. And now our narrator kisses Graham, who reciprocated but then pulled back. Reciprocated then pulled back. Oh no.
Forbidden
I
love.
can't. And then we get another 19th century. Gore was confronted by a strange blue light, which we now know is the door, the doorway
The time door,
for
yeah.
time travel. Now, Graham and the narrator are then relocated to a ministry-approved safe house, and Graham confesses that he tried to court the narrator because he is confused about modern romance, you know, trying to figure things out, but something works and they go to bed together. And then there's a lot of like weird sexual scenes between the two of them. And like, I love a good bit of spice in my romance books. I like a little bit of, you know, smut sprinkled in, you know, or a lot of it, depending on the type of book that we're reading. The way that this was so clinically written was so off-putting to me. And again, like I said, I didn't believe their romance. Like, I could see that that's where the author wanted us to go. Like, I could see the bricks being placed and like, you know, the us being pushed in the direction of this romance. But like, when she kissed him, I should have been like, oh my god, like, oh, what are they gonna do? Like, how are they gonna, you know, bridge the gap between their times and these timelines and all this shit? And instead I was kind of like,
I really wanted it to give like Kate and Leopold. Did you ever watch Kate and Leopold?
what is that?
It's like one of the best rom-coms in the world.
I've never heard of this in my life.
Oh
I've never even heard of it. Who's in it?
It is Hugh Jackman
Love.
and what's her name? Oh my gosh, Meg Ryan.
Okay, so we can watch that. We'll watch that one day. So
like from like 2001.
Okay.
But it's like about a physicist. He like travels through time
Mm-hmm.
and like ends up falling in love with Meg Ryan.
Okay.
And he's like a duke or whatever.
That?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't watched it in so long, but it's like so cute. And like I wanted it to give that and it didn't.
Okay, that makes sense.
But,
like, I see the vibes that you're pulling from.
Yeah, because Kate Leopold is like, she's a modern woman. And then he like travels through time and they fall in love. And he's from like way back when.
Mm-hmm.
And then like it's cute and everything, but like that's how I wanted it to give, and it just wasn't giving.
No, again, everything was just like flat.
Yeah.
But yeah, they go to bed together and he's inside of her a lot. That's the moral of the story. And the way that I said that is because that's the way that they say it in the book a lot.
And then we find out that all the expats have microchips in them.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. The narrator is aware of this.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't disclose it to Graham.
No.
She like has that thought like after they're intimate and is like, oh, maybe I should mention something about the microchips.
Perhaps that would be helpful.
Anyway, so back in the day in the 19th century, the remaining men on Graham's expedition do die of starvation and perish.
Not great. It's not ideal.
Nope.
But then our narrator and our group of expats, Graham, Arthur, and Margaret, all go to an art gallery that's showcasing J.M.W. Turner's works. And Graham concealed his distress when he saw a painting related to the Franklin expedition, which is the expedition he was on and he was a leader in. Yeah, there's just like a lot of mundane stuff that happens. And I think stuff like, you know, Quentin dying and her almost being killed and stuff like that were supposed to be the action and the in-between. But I just don't think it either wasn't written in a way that was like, this is an action sequence and you need to feel something, or it just was too much mundane surrounding it that it just like lessened the blow of everything. I don't know if that even makes sense, but like, yeah. But because now we're on to self-defense with the ministry.
So the narrator is doing a self-defense like training class. And during this session, the narrator does tell her handler who's Adela, that she unintentionally informed Graham about Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. And Adela's like, well, we unintentionally informed him about 9/11 as well. And this is where we kind of talk about like those two major things. Yeah. But I don't know.
Again, I understand why those two would have like an impact on someone, but I just don't understand why it is only those two explicitly that like would cause rifts in a timeline and cause them to like change course. Like, I don't know. I'm just gonna do this.
Yeah. So we go back to our little friends of the Franklin expedition. A search party discovered evidence of cannibalism during the expedition, which could
again,
explain the scurvy.
Could explain the scurvy, and not ideal, but it is what it is.
So Miss Adela does warn the narrator again of a spy/mole within the ministry. This is where things kind of start happening.
Yeah, but like
slowly. Yeah. Maggie's missing, which then prompts Graham to plan a safe meeting point for the expat in these tunnels. And then they go to Arthur's house, and he's dead. Then they reunite with Maggie and Thomas in the tunnels. And the narrator finally comes clean about the microchips. And Graham's like, yeah, Tress is gone. Like,
I also think it was interesting too that they had like the discovery of like LGBTQ like themes and identities in this, like with Arthur and Maggie. And I just like, there's so many, like, as we're reducing it down to like the action sequences that happen, I'm like, there's so much description about who these people are, what they're discovering, what they're going to do, but it was just done in such a bland, like if this were a seasoning, it would be flour. Like maybe a little salt sprinkled in. I wouldn't even give it cracked black pepper.
Anyway, so our narrator's loyalty to the ministry, she goes to seek help from the ministry. And there, she has discovered that Adela was held captive by the Brigadier, who revealed that Adela was the same person as the narrator, returned from the future. And then they escape the Brigadier.
And like, that's why her fingerprints were used, because they're hers, but from the future.
And Adela's like, we gotta stop this expat project.
Then she's, confronted by Graham and Thomas, and Adela advises the narrator to escape, which she did. And she gets to the ministry. When she's there, she was taken hostage by Semelia. She was the mole that was aiding the Brigadier. And the Brigadier revealed his mission to kill the narrator to prevent future actions from happening. So then our unnamed narrator, pew pew pew, shoots the time door, tries to destroy it, but then she just kills the Brigadier on accident instead. And then
so sorry for your loss.
Semelia escapes, and the narrator was unharmed, but Graham was waiting with a gun in hand at home for the narrator, and he insisted that she erase all of the expats' information using Adela's passcodes. And the narrator questioned Graham's love, and he left without a response. I question their love, obviously. And yeah, that's super fun. After that, our narrator was fired by the ministry. Couldn't imagine why. And the damaged time door had fatally injured Adela, who was her from the future. And she was also in the future timeline with Graham, and they had a son named Arthur who was a teenager. And like, I don't understand the science behind it. I don't understand the sci-fi. I don't understand why these things happen.
We talk about the long chapters, but this book is pretty thin.
Yes.
And I feel like this is a book that could have gone more in depth, and I would have probably enjoyed it if it was longer. Like,
yes, normally we say like, oh, we could have taken 50 pages out of this bad boy.
Yeah.
How much? It's 335 pages, and that's including the author's note.
Yeah. Like, I wanted more. I think that's why we were kind of bored, as like it had a lot of like the base, but I wanted like the peaks and valleys and everything from it.
And I know you haven't read it yet. You should, though. It's on Audible. You have to listen to Project Hail Mary at some point. I think you're going to love it. But Project Hail Mary is like the opposite of this in the fact that it is so science-y and so overwhelming that like, I think reading it, I would have been confused, but listening to the audiobook and the performance that it had, I was like enraptured by it. Like, I would rather be overwhelmed with information and have to like look something up after to fully understand it than to try and construct the why and the how myself and then be wrong about it and still don't understand why things happened.
Yeah. So back to our narrator.
Mhm.
She is depressed and moved back in with her parents when a parcel from Graham arrives,
Yes.
containing a photo hinting that him and Maggie had fled to Alaska.
Yes.
And it like leaves it open-ended if she goes and reunites with them. But
Mhm.
like in Graham's note, did it affirm that he did love the narrator. So
Yeah.
the happily ever after, I think, is assumed.
I would assume it, yeah. But yeah, that's the bare bones of the Ministry of Time. So that's all. That's what you missed on Glee. So we're going to talk about our song choices. All right. So I am featuring my first Noah Khan song. I'm surprised neither of us have picked a Noah Khan
I
song yet, and
know.
I'm very surprised. I usually always look at him just as like a maybe, but the reason that I picked specifically The View Between Villages, it's a short song, but it's kind of broken up into two pieces. The first piece is more about like having your dreams and being happy again, and the second piece is everything like falling apart and everything that they lost. And I feel like that is a perfect, summary of our narrator, falling in love with Graham and everything that happened at the end. So it starts with air in my lungs till the road begins, as the last of the bugs leave their homes again, and I'm splitting the road down the middle. For a minute, the world seems so simple. Obviously the splitting the road, splitting the timelines, but like for a minute, the world seems so simple. So when she's at this, safe house from the ministry, she's with Graham, and they're just two people falling in love, like regardless of eras that they came from timelines, everything seems so simple. For her, feel the rush in my blood. I'm 17 again. I'm not scared of death. I've got dreams again. I think she really allowed herself to start to imagine what a future post experiment would look like with Graham. And it just says, it's just me in the curve of the valley. There is meeting on earth. I am happy. And I think that is our narrator's like up until, shit hits the fan. I think that's her like finding joy and happiness in these mundane kind of everyday pieces of life.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes into past Algerbrook Road. I'm over the bridge, a minute from home, but I feel so far from it. And that's the depression sinking in as she's moving back in with her parents. And it says the death of my dog, the stretch of my skin, it's all washing over me. I'm angry again. The things that I lost here, the people I knew, they got me surrounded for a mile or two. And just the overwhelming loss that she had of all of the expats, basically, including Graham, who was the quote unquote love of her life, the future version of herself in a different timeline, Arthur, the life that she had built for herself and worked so hard toward in terms of her life as being a civil servant within the government. And then it just ends with the car's in reverse. I'm gripping the wheel. I'm back between villages and everything's still. And I think that's the moment where, she gets that photo from Graham, that kind of like note where like everything is still again, and she has a moment of this could go one way, this could go another way. It's that the split the road down the middle kind of theme coming back. But yeah, I love this song. I thought it was a really, not as on the nose pick for the book, and I thought that it fit really well with our narrator.
Yeah, it's a great song. I'm so glad you picked it. I picked The Scientist by Coldplay, which I was very excited to pick a Coldplay song. It starts out like, come up to meet you, tell you I'm sorry. You don't know how lovely you are. I had to find you, tell you I need you, tell you I set you apart. Which I think just kind of plays into their romance and like the end of it where like he sends her the parcel and everything.
Yeah.
And it just goes into like, tell me your secrets, ask me your questions. Oh, let's go back to the start. Running in circles, coming up tails, heads on a science apart. And the chorus is, nobody said it was easy. It's such a shame for us to part. Nobody said it was easy. No one ever said it would be this hard. Oh, take me back to the start. And I feel like that's just like very time travel-y. Like,
yeah.
Like we're apart, but nobody said it was going to be easy or it's going to be this hard, and just like take them back to the start, like destroying the time door and just kind of like, okay,
totally.
like what if this never happened? Like what if we never time traveled? What if it's there?
Absolutely.
And so it repeats the chorus again and everything there. But I think the vibe of the song too would definitely be in like an adaptation, which I think there is an adaptation to BBC. So we'll take a look at that. But I could definitely see the vibe of this song.
100%. Yep.
And I'm listening to it as soon as this is over.
Yes. Beautiful. Now we're going to talk about our final book ratings. So for those that are new, or as a little refresher, we like to rate in to the moon and to Saturn. I rate in moons, Hannah rates in Saturns, just because we feel like the traditional star scale doesn't necessarily encompass everything that we, like. And we also just want it to be cute and different. So, wow, I really don't know. I'm struggling. Okay, because like in my gut, I'm like, do I really want to be like, am I going to be this harsh? And I think I am. After talking about it more, I just like, usually when we sit down and we talk about a book, if I was on the fence about something, I end up liking it more by the time we finish talking about it, because we like, touch on things that maybe I didn't pick up on or I forgot about, but I didn't like hate it as much as I disliked like the Starling House and Comfort and Joy. So I do have to give it like a little bit more than that. So I'm going to go 2.5 moons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm doing 3.5 Saturns.
Oh.
Because I did like the bones. Like, I liked the expat idea. I liked that. It's just like different things I wish were different. Yeah. But 3.5 for me.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I was bored out of my goddamn mind. I was so bored. I could not wait for the book to be over. I was so over it. And it could have just been like maybe not the right time, or maybe because it was the audiobook. But yeah, I was between a 2.5 and a 3 was like my vibe. But I am gonna go 2.5. So
sounds good.
Now we're into our weekly episodes. So you're getting weekly content from us now, which is super exciting. Our next in-depth review episode is coming out 2 weeks from the release of this one. So we are going to be releasing All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker, which is a thriller mystery. And this one was also another very well read, highly rated book of 2024. So we're crossing our fingers that this one hits a little bit better than this book did.
Yes. But next week, we have our episode from the vault, our long story short. And that one will be yapping about our recent reads that we are not covering on the podcast.
Yes.
Thank you for listening. Definitely follow us on social media, on Instagram, TikTok, if it's still around here. I don't know what's going on with that. Discord, Patreon. Definitely give us your thoughts and your suggestions, especially with our new Look What You Made Me Read vault track episodes. We need those book recs ASAP.
Excited for that. So we will catch you next week with our long story short vault track. And why are we doing it like this?
I don't know. And remember, keep reading with kindness.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.